by far the best intro I've ever had. That was great. So yeah, I'm Matty. I'm the co-founder of Coliseum. Let's see if this is this working. The slides come. Oh, there we go. So yeah, for those that don't know, Coliseum runs ecosystem hackathons for the Solana Foundation as well as the broader community. We also have an accelerator program, which he mentioned, for the winners of the hackathon. And then we also have a venture fund, and we invest in all the teams getting into the accelerator and other pre-seed early stage teams in the Solana ecosystem. And I'll get into more about Coliseum. But what I want to kind of focus on and what this presentation is mostly about is the hackathon piece and kind of our inspiration of why we use a hackathon for Coliseum, but it's also a mechanism to just grow the Solana ecosystem overall. And a lot of our inspiration comes from history. So there's a lot of different models for funding innovation in history, and it goes all the way back to the 1st century BC with things like high stakes patronage. So there would be patrons, wealthy families, individuals that would put up basically requests for products in a modern sense, and try to tap into engineers and innovators during those times to build various things from art to buildings to a long tail of other things that they need in society at that time. And I think even later on, where this kind of got crystallized, at least from my perspective, was with Napoleon's Volta Prize, which was just an open competition, upheld by basically the French government at the time. And they wanted to just see what innovators across the world could bring to the table in terms of pushing society forward. And further, just not even inventing, but also commercializing those innovations, which was pretty key. And so they held this prize, and one of the first winners in 1880 was Alexander Graham Bell for the telephone. It was a pretty radical idea at the time. The funding that Bell got at that time from Napoleon turned into Bell Labs, and they went on to obviously create many innovations over time. There's also been very specific challenges put out. So DARPA had the Grand Challenge to push forward EV vehicle innovation in the early 2000s. And so just throughout history, this has been a common way of running competitions to get innovators to push things forward. In more modern times, I would say most people have probably heard of a hackathon. It's a developer event, usually 24 to 48 hours. You kind of get with some friends, you eat a bunch of pizza, drink a bunch of Red Bull, and sleep in sleeping bags, and you try to basically compete for various bounties that sponsors put up. So whatever technology or organization is hosting the hackathon, usually there's a series of cash prizes involved in building specific products that use that technology. My first sort of touch point with hackathons was when I worked at Square. We held this basically week-long internal hackathon that ended up actually getting Bitcoin integrated into Cash App, but Cash App itself, for those that don't know, maybe if you don't live in the United States, it's a very popular way to send money back and forth through a mobile app. This application turned out to be one of the largest revenue drivers for the company, which I thought was really interesting. It produced billions of dollars in revenue today for Square. But then I kind of learned about all these other sort of hack weeks or hackathons that internal companies were running, everything from like Facebook to actually Odeo, which was the podcast company before Twitter. They built Twitter during a hackathon. Spotify's Discover Weekly, Atlassian's Jira, Service Desk, and even something like Google has not what they call Hack Week or a hackathon, but what they call 20% time, which is basically they encourage employees to use a portion of their time to work on some sort of side project that could benefit the company overall. And so things like AdSense and Gmail, which drive a tremendous amount of revenue for the business, were started as side projects. And so When I got into crypto in 2017, I was working in Ethereum and working for a project called 0x. One of the things that we decided to do early on was to try to run one of these like internal company hackathons and see what we could produce. And that was kind of the start of it for me, and kind of the beginnings of, I'd say, the inspiration for Coliseum later on. Um, just to touch on before getting into Coliseum and what we're doing with that organization, it's important to touch on like kind of the history of just crypto hackathons itself. And so the first was ETH Global. So when Ethereum was making a big push to grow kind of developers and also startups building on the network, there's an organization called ETH Global. It exists today. They run what's more of like a traditional tech hackathon, where it's an IRL place. You go to a company conference area or a gymnasium or a conference center, and you hack for 48 hours on some sort of Ethereum project. And that's had some success, but I think a lot of the problems is that traditional hackathons are very ephemeral. Meaning like, you're only working on it for a very brief amount of time. There's only so much you can build in terms of a proof of concept in 48 hours. And so when I joined Solana Labs in 2020, we decided to start running hackathons and sort of modify the structure of what people thought of a hackathon to be more like the historical references of this. So more like the Volta Prize, or more like internal kind of tech Silicon Valley company hackathons that I had seen become successful in terms of creating products that generate revenue. And so when in 2020, when we ran our first one, which was called Wormhole, we decided that it was just going to be an open competition. It was during COVID, so it was obviously going to be online. We were going to run it over the course of maybe 6 to 7 weeks, and just have basically anyone. There were no specific bounties other than you had to integrate with Solana. So we weren't very prescriptive with what people should build, and we just thought that was a better model to bring not just developers but more startup founders who wanted to basically start building enduring products that would become kind of on-chain drivers for the ecosystem. And so over time, we've developed and iterated and kind of like modified the structure and created marketing channels around these events, and that led to sort of the development and spin out of Coliseum, which is the organization that I run with my co-founders today. And the hackathons have grown to be the largest in the world, not just in crypto, but tech broadly, and has driven a lot of the success in terms of venture funding. So about 80% of all VC-backed startups in the Solana ecosystem started as hackathon projects. Those companies cumulatively are around 20 billion in terms of market cap. And many of the names that have been presenting, even the previous presentation on Camino, that original team was a winner of an early hackathon. Even one project I know that's missing here is actually like Step, who's putting on this conference. They were an early hackathon winner a few years ago, and so Coliseum's mission is to make sure that this keeps happening. Like, how do we make sure that there are more Caminos coming into the ecosystem, and what sort of gaps can we fill in terms of accelerating those folks? And so that's really kind of where we started with Coliseum. We've built out basically our own like web platform that allows people to obviously participate in the hackathons, but also to do things like, how do you find a co-founder, or how do you sort of maybe share your product ideas before the hackathon starts. I think when I joined crypto, and we hear this all the time from people, even at events like this, they ask us like, how do I find a co-founder? Like, where do I find people? Like, none of my friends when I got into crypto were into crypto at the same time, and so I had to go to IRL events to find kind of my people in a sense. And so we've built this platform, this directory of all these developers. There's over 50,000 now developers that have signed up for the platform, where you can search for potential co-founders. You can see kind of what skills they have, what they're interested in building, and start DMing them and getting a sense of what they're interested in long term. And then obviously using the hackathon is sort of like the first test point of that kind of like co-working relationship. to see if they actually want to build a startup together. And we've seen this work in the past. So like I think Tensor is a good example of this. They used a similar platform to find each other. They didn't know each other. They used the hackathons to sort of iterate on product ideas over time that led to Tensor and obviously what they're building with Vector today. And so we've sort of modeled like the hackathon. This is a great, idea, experimentation, innovation sort of competition. But then of the top, 10 to 15 teams, what can we do through the accelerator to help them kind of go from just an idea or a proof of concept to an actually full-fledged startup? And so we've run two batches of accelerator startups so far. We're about to run our third with our third hackathon. And I think we've learned a lot through this. We've raised a venture fund around this. In fact, like we invest $250,000 in each team coming through the program, and just try to help them everything from legal to go to market to developer, kind of getting to mainnet. I think a lot of people kind of get to DevNet in the hackathon, but they need a lot of help on the technical side sometimes to get to mainnet, and that can include things like audits and hiring maybe the first or second engineer. And so we have a few minutes left. I'll just mention that Coliseum in the future will kind of continue to lean on some of the learnings we've had from history, whether it's the Volta Prize or what's happened with kind of internal company hackathons and how those are developing. And I think our goal is to just further accelerate the number of startups that are pushing sort of the ecosystem forward into the future. And so we're running our third hackathon. It's already probably going to be our next biggest hackathon. There's about 7,000 developers across the world that are already participating. It's called the Breakout Hackathon. And there will be basically a product submission form that will become available on our site on May 16th. That's where you can submit your product if you're a builder. And then we'll invest in 10 of the top winners coming out of the event. And hope you guys, if you are building a startup, you can come chat with me after, but also make sure to check out our Twitter. It's at Coliseum, our website at coliseum.com. And really appreciate you guys' time listening to what we're doing.